In 1547, the world received a great gift. A writer was born. Although little is known of his early youth, Miguel de Cervantes was born in Spain. A writer of stories, plays, and poems. Earlier, another man was born. In reality, a man called Alonso Quijada, who was a distant ancestor of the woman who would one day become Cervantes' wife, Catalina. Alonso lived in the early 1500s and was known as a believer in the romantic tales of time. And it was said he was slightly mad. Alonso would reside in Cervantes' mind for many years until one day, while sitting in prison at one of the lowest points in his life, Cervantes would create a character who would suffer all the agonies of his own past life and would spring forth into the world in a new identity as Don Quixote de la Mancha. Much has been written and discussed about who in reality was Don Quixote and what his existence meant for society. Was he just a pathetic, entertaining character in a story? Or was he a hidden criticism of authority, or perhaps mankind, through a satire? It is clear, however, that the character known throughout the world as Don Quixote shared many of the author's life experiences. It was 58 years after the birth of Cervantes that Don Quixote escaped from his mind and found his way into print. What he emerged as, his character, his madness, his face, became the most universally recognized character of fiction in all the literature of the world, from then until the present day. Who was Don Quixote? Scholars have read and reread the story, and countless books and essays by literary critics have been written. And yet there has not emerged the single theory that might be universally accepted. One reason for this is the generally accepted notion that a writer's life experiences greatly influenced the works produced. Many novels and essays clearly reflect the background of the author, and the viewpoints of most people are shaped by their life experiences. But in the case of Cervantes, which life experiences shaped his thoughts and imagination? During his lifetime, Cervantes experienced events that in and of themselves would make a complete soap opera in today's world, or an epic motion picture, one in which many would find the events unbelievable. How could one man live such a life and yet be creative and productive enough to leave the world with a rich legacy of great literature, a treasure that would endure for centuries? Cervantes was born in 1547 in the small village of Alcalá de Henares, and little is known of his early years. The town is about 20 miles from Madrid. Dating back to Roman times, the area reflects its rugged climate like many regions of Spain, and its long heritage of history and religion. Historians describe his family as one of modest financial resources, but of some social stature as the result of their educations and professions, which included medicine and law. There seemed to be many in his family background who were quite literate for those times, suggesting that earlier generations of the Cervantes family were well educated, university trained, and possibly of Jewish, Moorish backgrounds. Conversos is how many family members were remembered. These were people who were converted to Christianity and remained in Spain after others were expelled. Miguel himself was christened on October 9th, 1547. He was probably born on September 9th, St. Michael's Day, as he was named Michael. Such was the custom in those times. No one is quite sure. His father was Rodrigo de Cervantes, a less than successful barber surgeon, more barber than surgeon. Much of his life was spent trying to eke out a living. Look you, Sancho, by the same oath as you swore just now, I swear, said Don Quixote, that you have less brains than any squire has or ever had in the whole world. Is it possible that this thing to do with knights errant appears to be chimera, folly, nonsense, and to go all contrariwise? This is not really the case. But there is a cruel ways among us who change and alter our deeds and transform them according to their pleasure and their desire either to favor us or injure us. So, what seems to you to be a barber's basin appears to me to be Mambrino's helmet, and to another as something else. It shows a rare foresight in the sage who is on my side to make what is really and truly Mambrino's helmet seem to everyone a basin. For, as it is of such great value, the whole world would persecute me in order to get it from me. However, as they see that it is nothing more than a barber's basin, they do not trouble about it, as was evident in the case of the wretch who tried to destroy it and left it behind him on the ground. For I promise you that if he had recognized it, he would never have left it there. At the age of 22, Miguel found himself in Italy as the result of acting as a Spanish tutor for Julio Aquaviva y Aragon, who had been sent by Pope Pius V to come to Madrid to deal with King Philip II, only to be rebuffed because of his lack of knowledge of the Spanish language. Philip II was the Spanish monarch whose life so much influenced the history of Spain and Western Europe during the 16th century. The century of Cervantes was the century of Philip, and the century of Philip was the century of Cervantes. From the life of Philip came the Inquisition, the exploration of the New World, the turbulent wars against the Moors, and the incredible El Escorial. From the life of Cervantes came a treasure of literature, including a major development in writing as the idea of the novel took hold. The meeting between Philip II and Aquaviva was very unpleasant, and he was told by Philip that for their next meeting it was advised that the Pope's messenger come with the ability to speak Spanish. This Aquaviva was able to do with the help of a young tutor, Miguel Cervantes. As a result of this experience, Cervantes was asked to return to Rome to teach Spanish in the Vatican to the Archbishop and others. Aquaviva eventually became a cardinal, and Cervantes stayed in Rome, until, for reasons not fully known, he enlisted in the Italian army. There is no doubt about his religious feelings and his devotion to Christianity. In later years, when conversion to Islam would have spared him 5 years of slavery, he remained a devout Christian until his release. The war, which resulted in the Battle of Lepanto, has been described as the last crusade. It was Christian Europe's last stand against the conquest of the Mediterranean and southern Europe by the Ottoman Turks. When the chance came to serve both God and the youthful desire for adventure and glory, both Miguel and his brother enlisted in the army to fight the Muslims at the Battle of Lepanto. Cervantes was badly injured in that battle, but survived, with the loss of one arm. For when ships are locked and grappled together, the soldier has no more space left him than 2 feet of plank on the beakhead. But though he sees in front of him countless pieces of artillery threatening from the enemy's side, each a minister of death and no more than a spear's length from his body, and though he knows that at his first careless step he will go down and visit the deep bosom of Neptune, nevertheless, with undaunted heart, sustained by the honor which spurs him on, he exposes himself as a mark for all their shot, and endeavors to pass along that narrow causeway onto the enemy's ship. And most amazing of all, no sooner does one man fall, never to rise again this side of doomsday, than another takes his place. And if he in turn falls into the sea, which lies in wait for him like an enemy, another, and yet another takes his place, without a moment passing between their deaths. The greatest display of valor and daring to be found in all the hazards of war. Having successfully survived one of the bloodiest battles in history, however, his life was to be turned around on his way back to Spain by his capture and eventual enslavement by Algerian pirates. After 5 years of imprisonment, he was ransomed by his family, which impoverished all of his relatives, reducing them to a lower social status. The effects of this financial disaster lasted throughout Cervantes' life. I was one of those put on ransom. For as it was known that I was a captain, nothing could prevent their putting me on the list of gentlemen to be redeemed, although I pleaded that I had small means and no property. They put a chain on me, more as a sign that I was to be ransomed than for my safekeeping. So I spent my life in that bagnio with many more gentlemen and men of quality chosen to be held for ransom. And although hunger and lack of clothes distressed us at times, in fact, almost always, nothing disturbed us so much as to hear and witness wherever we went the unparalleled and incredible cruelty which my master practiced. Every day he hanged someone, impaled another, cut off the ears of a third, and this on the slightest excuse or on none at all, so that even the Turks acknowledged that he did it only for the sake of doing it, and because it was in his nature to be the murderer of the entire human race. But where does fantasy and fiction end and reality begin? How Cervantes' life experiences were intertwined into the character of Don Quixote are best illustrated by many of the stories told, as Don Quixote would entertain people he met with long, elaborate tales. Throughout Spain, rivers and bridges are a part of every landscape. Flocks of sheep still cross them daily, and their magnificent arches are an integral part of the living memory of Spanish history. On one such bridge in Leon, a famous tournament was held, and the story was known to every Spanish schoolboy. In 1434, a knight-errant, wearing a chain around his neck to indicate his slavery to the woman he loved, stood on the bridge with 9 of his warriors and challenged every passer-by to deny that his fair lady was not the most beautiful woman on earth. It is said that 727 passers-by took up the challenge and were instantly engaged in combat, leaving many badly hurt, and at least one dead. It is no surprise, therefore, that such adventures would befall the hero of Cervantes' writings. The life of a soldier and the often expressed activity are often expressed by Don Quixote as he spins his tales to various audiences. Another example is his experience with the women in his life. In the novel, Don Quixote was deeply struck by Dulcinea and defended her honor at all costs. Now that his armor was clean, his helmet made into a complete headpiece, a name found for his horse, and he confirmed in his new title, it struck him that there was only one more thing to do: to find a lady to be enamored of. For a knight-errant without a lady is like a tree without leaves or fruit, and a body without a soul. He said to himself again and again, if I, for my sins or by good luck, were to meet with some giant happens hereabouts, as generally happens to knights-errant, and if I were to overthrow him in the encounter, or cut him down the middle, or, in short, conquer him and make him surrender, would it not be well to have someone to whom I could send him as a present, so that he could enter and kneel down before my sweet lady and say in tones of humble submission, Lady, I am the giant Caraculiambro, lord of the island of Malindrania, whom the never sufficiently to be praised knight Don Quixote de la Mancha conquered in single combat in order to appear before your grace, so that your highness might dispose of me according to your will. Oh, how pleased our knight was when he found that he had made up this speech, and even gladder when he found someone whom he could call his lady. It happened, it is believed, in this way. In a village near his, there was a very good-looking farm girl whom he had been taken with at one time, although she is supposed not to have known it or had proof of it. Her name was Aldonza Lorenzo, and it was she, he thought, fit to call the lady of his fancies, and casting about for a name which should not be too far away from her own, yet suggest and imply a princess and a great lady, he resolved Dulcinea del Toboso, for she was a native of El Toboso, him as a name which seemed to him as musical, strange, and significant as those others that he had devised for himself and his possessions. Some of the women in Cervantes' life may have prompted that attitude. For example, the mother of his daughter Isabella, was a woman named Ana Franca, sometimes known as Ana Franca de Rojas, or Ana de Villafranca. She lived with Cervantes for only a few months after the birth of their child, and then left them to resume her life on the street. Was this episode in his life the source of Quixote's dream of the ideal woman? Was this why defending the honor of his lady was of paramount importance to the noble knight-errant? Mention the names Hamlet, or Othello, or perhaps Scrooge and Marley, Robinson Crusoe, or Tom Sawyer, and there would be recognition in many countries of the world that these are characters from books. But show a picture of Don Quixote de la Mancha, a fictional character created by the mind of Miguel Cervantes nearly 400 years ago, and there would probably be instant recognition anywhere in the world, in all languages and cultures. His life has been presented in art, on the stage, in music, films, ballet, and in each new medium and art form to be developed. Anyone wishing to express love, pain, loyalty, disappointment, anger, frustration, trust, failure, faith, madness, any human emotion or experience, can recall this story of Don Quixote and relate a situation to or more of the many adventure friend Sancho and his faithful friend Sancho. No one questions why this has happened. Travel anywhere in Spain today. Where can be found the home of Don Quixote? And you will be told with great certainty that it is in one place or another. For many Spaniards still think of him as a real-life person. No one questions why this is so. It seems to be universally accepted that somehow there is truth in Cervantes' creed, developed from the lifetime of the author and ultimately shared with the world. The old half-mad gentleman seems to have struck a response in the human heart everywhere on earth. But why take the form of a long-forgotten character, a knight of olden days? Why should this character so represent the mind and heart of Cervantes? Perhaps it was best explained by Sancho Panza when asked, "What is a knight?" "What's the gentleman's name?" asked the Asturian maid. "Don Quixote de la Mancha," replied Sancho Panza. "He's a knight-errant, one of the best and bravest the world has seen for a very long time." "What's a knight-errant?" asked the maid. "Are you so green that you don't know that?" replied Sancho. "Then I'll tell you, my girl, that a knight-errant, to cut a long story short, is beaten up one day and made emperor the next. Today he's the most unfortunate and poverty-stricken creature in the world. Tomorrow he'll have 2 or 3 kingdoms to give to his squire." "Well, seeing that you have such a fine master," said the hostess, "how is it that you aren't at least a count?" "There's plenty of time yet," replied Sancho.